Welcome, everyone. We have the participants joining. I'm going to give a couple of minutes, but not too many because we have a full program today with our speakers. Welcome, everyone. I'm just giving a couple of minutes for people to join, and then I'm going to start soon. All right, 2 minutes after 4 p.m. in Europe, and in other parts of the world, it's still in the morning for South America, for example. So I'm going to start this webinar today. I want to welcome you all. My name is Daniela Rizzi. I am a senior expert for nature-based solutions and biodiversity at ICLE Europe. I will be moderating today's webinar together with my colleague Maria Alonso Martinez. She is a junior officer at the ICLE World Secretariat for Circular Food Systems. We're truly excited to have you all here today. We're going to talk about tapping into the private sector and investment for nature-based solutions and biodiversity projects. We deeply value and respect the expertise of our speakers here today, and their insights and experience are the reason and the foundation of this webinar. Thank you for joining us for this important conversation. Next slide, please. So here you're going to see on screen two resources that the Interact Bio project produced. The first on the left side, you see the guide to biodiversity financing for cities and regions. We also have the team putting the links up in the chat for all. And we also have the catalog on financing and technical assistance opportunities for China, Colombia, and South Africa. So these are the regions where that in which Interact Bio was working. So yeah, I think these two catalogs are also relevant for people beyond the project. So we are very proudly sharing them with you. I would like to ask for the third slide. So here you see in the screen the speakers today. I'm going to present them every time they are going to be flashed on screen. But I just wanted to give you an overview. Next slide, please. And then actually, I'm going to say that today we have this agenda. But before I present the agenda, I just want to say that we are very happy when people post questions. So you're going to listen to the inputs from our speakers, but our Q&A is going to be open for you, and we're going to be monitoring it. So please, we invite all of you to pose your questions there, and we're going to make sure that we can flash these questions to our speakers, and they're going to try to respond to them online as much as they can. Also, if you're not posting questions, we might send you some reminders in the chat, because we want to make sure that we use the time here for it to be interactive also. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna start setting the scene, and then we will have our speakers today. As many of you might know, the financing scape for nature-based solutions reveals a very significant gap. So we only have 18% coming from the private sector. This insight comes from UNEP's latest report, The State of Finance for Nature, which was published just last year. And it underscores the substantial room for increased private sector engagement in NBS financing. We are witnessing a trend towards integrating private and public funding, diversifying the financial avenues available for nature-based solutions and biodiversity projects. But this mix, it actually broadens quite a bit our funding sources, but it also fosters innovative approaches to financing and to boost the impact and the long-term viability of the projects. In public-private partnerships, PPPs, we always have a little bit of challenges because we have to make sure that we align the diverse interests of public and private sectors. And aligning these interests is actually quite crucial for success. And also transparency is a very key point. So building trust and ensuring mutual benefits. So addressing potential conflicts proactively is essential to prevent derailing the project's goals. The effectiveness of PPPs in promoting environmental sustainability relies also in a careful balance of interests. It needs open communication and, of course, conflict resolution strategies. So I just wanted to make this setting the scene before I give the floor to our speaker. So please, next slide. So in today's webinar, we will start with a presentation on different PPP models that local and regional governments can pursue to fund, implement, and manage NBS. And also not only NBS projects, but also biodiversity projects. With 18 years of experience, our speaker today, Monica Altamirano de Jong, is a leader in advising governments and NDBs on catalyzing private sector investments in infrastructure, water, climate adaptation, and nature-based solutions projects. As the founder on Altamira, she applies systems thinking to drive regenerative finance, facilitating complex multi-party financing for a transition to a regenerative economy. Additionally, she's part of the Network Nature Consortium, and she's serving as Water Equities Director when she integrates climate and water resources principles into investment decisions and holds an honorary senior researcher position at the Delft University of Technology. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Monica.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniela and the ICLEI team for the invitation. Really happy to be here. So what I'm going to share with you today is, how do we go from all those global lofty commitments to local needs, and basically through an important leverage point, that is, how do we finance regenerative infrastructure systems? I mean, very quickly before we go into the depth of public-private partnership models, I think we all know we are living in a polycrisis, or what we call a planetary emergency, right? Which is the result of a very mechanistic view of the world in how we plan our investments in silos and how we seek wealth only focus on GDP. But how do we reverse all these trends and deal with multiple interlocking challenges in a context of diminishing public resources? And the Global Commission on Adaptation in 2019 already said we need 3 revolutions: one in understanding what got us here, one in the way we plan our investments, and in the way we finance. And we will be working and talking about some of those revolutions also, because they all translate then in different models that might be possible of public-private partnerships. Now, here, I won't go much in depth, and I have to say I will sometimes go quick to some of the slides because I want to give you an overview, right, of what's happening. So the bad news is that we are facing a polycrisis. The good news is that because it has become so material, that risk, we really see also a number of emerging financing opportunities. Basically, there are a number of financial regulations and standards and impact investing trends that are pushing and asking for investments on the real economy that are not greenwashing, but showing impact. And investments in climate, investments in nature serve both climate and the reduction also of water risks. We also see that the future to leverage right finance towards this project is to structure mosaic projects, is projects that have multiple benefits and that are able to tap into different sources of finance like water and biodiversity, climate and biodiversity, and so forth. And so we will go on that, right? Because we know, we know that we need to invest much more in nature-based solutions, but how do we close the implementation gap from all these wonderful plans and ideas we have in our cities to get them implemented? So one of the things that is important to realize is that to secure funding and financing for these projects, we need to build what is called the investment case. Even if it's public investment, we still need to build a strategic, economic, commercial, financial, and management business case. Now, the problem is in most of our planning efforts, we stop at the economic cost-benefit analysis, and that's it. But that's not enough to get private sector to come on board. To get private sector to come on board, you have to show that the spending proposal is affordable, that you have a capable authority, for example, that will commission the project, and that you have capable service providers to undertake the project that are able to carry risk. And for that, the implementation arrangement, to prepare a sound implementation arrangement is crucial. And that's where the financing framework for water security that I've applied in the past to nature projects through the NIAT European project is a guideline for people doing planning to then say, okay, going from the planning to structure a pipeline of projects by thinking, what type of transaction am I looking at? The technical and financial characteristics. What's the level of service I want to ensure over time? And I will come back to this so you will understand what I'm talking about. And what's the institutional setting? Because in every country, different type of public-private community combinations will be possible depending on the incentives and the expertise you have at hand. So basically, and how does this work? So I will show you very quickly. It has two main phases, right? The first phase is to zoom out, because we, of course, are very convinced about the value of nature-based solutions. But unless we're able to show how these nature-based solutions can make a change at the city or even at economy level, we won't be successful in attracting capital. So here to the left, you see, normally you will like zoom out and think, okay, what's happening in this city or this watershed that shows that the way we're developing is not sustainable, that every time we grow, we're basically becoming more vulnerable and destructing the environment. And then you try to picture, in the same way that you picture these vicious cycles, you will show how, in this case, for example, spongy mountain terrace is a type of urban development that we were proposing in Semarang in Indonesia, showing how your nature-based solutions will make a real change in that and change the paradigm how the city develop, right? So when you have this overview that you see in the right of all the benefits, the program of nature-based solutions you're proposing, that's the perfect base to start to think about blended finance, because you see that you have water risk benefits, you have climate benefits, maybe you even have like benefits for the commercial sector in that city that will have a better environment, right? So that's the first part, because you start to see, okay, what sources of finance can I tap? Now, the second part, though, is equally important, because to enable finance to flow to a specific NBS project, you will need to zoom in, right? And get to the details of the commercial, financial, and management business cases. And here, two things that you need to remember is you have to make a cash flow profile of the project. So how much will it cost to implement it, and how over time much it will cost you to maintain it, but also the type of incomes you will have and the risk profile. And one thing we found out during this European project is that basically you really need to have a hierarchy. You can have 10 co-benefits, but you need to think which are the 2 or 3 services you will give, and then decide how you structure the way to get that money back from each of those services. I'll speed up here a little bit. And there are a number of steps. I won't go in detail into that. You can see there is a handbook that it was published some time ago, and you can see, but based on that hierarchy, you can start to see which type of funding you can tap, and only after that go into financing. Here, I want you to remember that it's like if you want to buy a house, for example, you first have to show you have an inheritance and you have a salary. That's the funding part, like taxes, tariff for transfers. And only then we can think, okay, how do we get the mortgage? How do we get the bonds to do that possible? What we also found out in this report is that there are like basically 4 models, right? And in each of those models, you have different type of public-private interactions. So you have public project procurement, who could be technically a public-private partnership contract, but you have also environmental stewardship, collective investment schemes like the water funds in Latin America that you may have heard of, and the environmental markets. I'll give you 4 examples of that very quickly. So that's, for example, this other parties is a typical environmental stewardship type of structure. You have a utility called other parties who then said, well, to reduce the risk, to reduce the cost of treating that water that is tapped from agricultural areas farther away, what they did is they acquired the lands and then they gave financial support and technical assistance to those farmers. And they lease the land to the farmers for a symbolic euro with the condition that these farmers change their practices, right? So here is a type of environmental stewardship from a utility that could be public or private. Copenhagen is more, the Copenhagen Cloud Management Plan basically is more like public procurement process, but I will go to the next slide because you will see that what they did is they also involved the insurance sector, because the houses that adapted, right, and made investments, including some of them nature-based solutions investments, they had a 25% reduction in the insurance fee. And then you see how different actors paid for the whole adaptation plan. That includes nature-based solutions. So the utilities through the water tariff, the cities, because the more value these places have because they are more protected and they don't get flooded, they will recover that through taxes, and every property finance the interventions at the house level. This is another one, but I will have to, this is a collective scheme. So all the hotels in Mexico, right, in the Cancun area, they pay to the municipality based on that collective fund buys insurance, and every time that there is a storm, there is then a payout that will go and fix this coral reef that has a main function to protect also those hotels. And this is also more a typical, you could say, environmental markets for for storm water runoff. But I really want to get you to this one, and I know that my time is almost coming. So you see, all of those examples took a lot of time and a lot of transaction costs for these people to make them happen. So what we're wanting to do through network nature plans is to create the local capacity to make sure these type of structures become like easy to structure for these governments, right? And so one of the things that you will see here is that we're aiming to design a program that helps we don't have to create the capacity from scratch. There are experts in PPP, there are experts in biodiversity, there are hydrologists, right? So we are developing a program that is able to in a very accelerated way, bring all those disciplines and enable them to work together and to plan investments in a mission-driven way, not in silos, but thinking, where is this watershed and community now? What's the future that it looks regenerative? Which investments we need to do? And basically, and this, yeah, like I said, it's about having those accelerated process of capacity development that are able together to break their silos. I mean, silos are important to have a specialized knowledge, but you need to know when to break them they can together do this zoom out and then the zoom in to structure new types of financing models. But what is very important too is to have safe spaces for public-private interaction, because everybody talks about having those partnerships, but the public and the private sector fear the engagement with these parties. So we need to create the capacities for them to engage at a very early time, no? And for that, we think that system analysis techniques, institutional economics, finance, trying to get this group of, you could say, kind of like system integrator in cities, the basic skills to do that. So if you're working along those lines, please definitely let us know. Thank you, Daniela.
Monica, I am the one to say thank you. I think this was a very interesting presentation. You showed different typologies, and I think that we're going to get some interesting questions to you about the presentation that you just did. So now let's hear from someone that has been part of the linear park strategy and plan for the city of Campinas in Brazil. And this person is very knowledgeable about private sector investment and engagement, and he's going to outline some limitations of PPPs that he saw, but maybe also some lessons learned. So for this, I'm going to pass the word to Gabriel Dias Mangolini. Neves. Gabriel is an environmental engineer with a master's degree in energy, currently coordinating the Linear Park and Reconecta program at the Environmental Licensing Department in Campinas. He's actively involved in regional and metropolitan environmental planning, specializing in nature-based solutions implementation. Neves also serves on the management board of the Municipal Fund for Urban Development, the board of directors of PROAMP, and participates in key chambers such as AGENCAMP's Thematic Chamber of Sanitation and Environment and the Technical Chamber of Natural Resources for the Committee of some basins in Brazil. So without further ado, I'm passing the mic to you, Gabriel.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Clay. Thanks so much to invite me. Let me share my screen. Good morning, still good morning or good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you are. I will show in a slightly different way how we are escalating private sector investments in the implementations of nature-based solutions, or NBS, in this case, through linear parks in Campinas. For those who don't know, Campinas is located in the countryside of São Paulo state, which has almost 800 square kilometers of area and 1.2 million inhabitants. And also, it's part of the metropolitan regions of Campinas, with almost 3.3 million inhabitants and responsible for almost 10% of the state's GDP. And like many cities around the world, mainly in Latin America and other regions of the global south, the lack of territorial planning in some regions of the municipality has been causing environmental degradations of important environmental areas. In this kind of images, it's possible to observe erosion process, irregular occupations, disposal of solid waste and effluents, and the presence of invasive exotic species in urban riparian forests. So to reverse these scenarios, Campinas in the last decade has been following the path of environmental planning in an integrated manner. We prepare sectorial environmental plans. They are green plan, water resources, basic sanitations, environmental educations, and also climate action. This is one ongoing right now, all covered by the municipal environmental policies and reviewed in an integrated manner with territorial planning. Today, we will focus just on the municipal green plan. So to understanding the territory and what the real problems are was essential in these projects. So especially regarding the quality and quantity of the green areas. As in this map, the map of Campinas, although it has 11% of its territory covered in vegetation and a high rate of green areas per inhabitants, more than 87%, 87 square meters, it is possible to observe a high fragmentations of the remaining forests, and considering only the urban perimeters and green areas, which also provide a social functions, we observed an index of green areas with a social functions per inhabitant of just 6 square meters. With the analysis at the neighborhood level in 2016, more than 7% of Campinas neighborhoods did not have green areas with social functions. Or on the second map, we can see urban regions that do not meet the minimum accessibility criteria, a minimum distance of 2.5 kilometers or 30 minutes of walking between their houses in a green area. Considering this, the calculations of the density of green areas by neighborhood shows disparities and imbalances in the distributions and accessibility of these areas. The results can be seen on the map, especially in regions expressed on the map by the dark orange colors with a high deficit. And also, the index projects for 2026 without any municipal actions would reduce to 5.3 square meters per inhabitant. Based on all these results presented in the diagnosis, the municipalities sought to use NBSs as a means to equalize these distributions of areas aligned with the recovery of degraded areas. So the linear parks programs, as also NBS, aims to increase these distributions through the promotions of leisure and sporting activities, no motorized circulations, the promotions of environmental educations, and sense of belonging, as well as the recovery of riparian forests, measures of rainwaters, increasing the flood zones, controlling erosions, and also acting as ecological corridors. Resulting in 49 proposed linear parks, and in this map represents the depth of social green areas, considering the scenarios of implementations of all the 49 linear parks by the year 2026. So in this case, the index will increase to 12.8 square meters per inhabitant. Considering the need to implement almost 900 hectares of NBS with these 49 linear parks, it is essential to seek investments from the private sector since public resources may be limited. But how can we convince the private sector to do this? The public-private partnerships, or PPP, that I already said earlier, these options, which are normally presented, are probably not very viable in our case, since the linear park projects to be implemented are located in low-income areas with low market or advertising potential, without the possibility of some types of collections, such as charging for access, as they are essential, open in public spaces. They are also far from commercial and industrial centers, and their benefits and co-benefits are essentially public and community. Therefore, Campinas is looking for other ways to attract and direct private resources to this program. The consolidations of linear parks in the municipal master plan as a structuring element of territorial planning was the main step for us, where the systems of green areas and conservation units created allows the directions of public policies and also reviewing of urban criteria in the municipality. In the case of private areas, the master plan allowed us the revisions of legislations on new urban housing developments, where the implementations of incident linear parks is mandatory by the owners, meeting the criteria and their approval by the responsible municipal sectors. Until now, we have 18 basic projects and 90 executive projects have been approved, in addition to the implementations of 2 linear parks, as shown in the images. There are already more than 23 hectares in approved executive projects, just executive projects, and almost 10 hectares implemented as a linear parks in the territory. In the case of public areas, we are directing environmental compensations from the municipal and state environmental licensing process towards the implementations of linear parks. So far, around 8.5 million reais or 1.6 million euros have been invested in reforestations and the implementations of sports, in lasers and activity mobility equipments. And also within the neighborhood impact studies process, the implementations of 6 linear parks representing almost 6.3 million euros were recommended as compensations for large projects, new larger projects. But the challenge now is the escalate investments to maintain these public spaces. The municipality has been analyzing initiatives for the economic exploitation of just small local business, with the counterpart of maintaining parts of these parks and the possibility of some kind of partnerships with cooperatives or associations. Some examples of this is the possibility of producing organic fruits and or vegetables combined with the environmental educations inside of these linear parks. So the case of Campinas shows that it's possible to direct and influence the private sector through existing mechanisms, as long as territorial environmental planning is carried out and social environmental demands are well defined in our municipal legislations. This link of YouTube, it's a video with the subscribed in English to our all linear parks program. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much for this presentation. It was really, really interesting to see really what a city is doing in terms of collaborations with the private sector. I'm sure that we're going to get very interesting questions about it. So now I would like to call to the stage Julia Amato. She will present on the Bioclima initiative that seeks to connect local and regional government afforestation initiatives with suitable private sector funders, partners, and investors. I'm going to talk a little bit about Julia here and her CV. So after graduating in forestry services in ETIFOR, Julia specialized in the economic evaluation of ecosystem services, their valorization through governance and innovative financing schemes. Today, she coordinates the Nature Governance Business Program, which supports public bodies in managing natural resources and recognizing, preserving, and enhancing the benefits that nature provides for humanity. In her 7 years of experience, she applied her multifaceted knowledge in a diversity of contexts at local, regional, and international levels, working through different funding sources and identifying for each case the most appropriate path and solutions together with the involved entities. Okay, so Julia, the mic is with you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the nice introduction as well. And good morning and good afternoon also from my part. So yeah, today I will explain you a little bit of the Bioclima initiative. And at the end of the presentation, I will also leave you some links so you can also find out more information if you want. So the main objective of this initiative is to incentivize corporate action through public-private partnerships and biodiversity impact certification in Lombardy region. That is a region located in northern Italy. I work in Etipol, and just two words to say that we are an environmental consulting company with the main purpose of putting nature at the heart of the decision making by developing science-based solutions. And inside our activities, we develop many services. And in particular, we are passionate about exploring new financing mechanisms and payment for ecosystem services. And that is why we developed this kind of mechanism that I will explain you to today. So our main partners and key actors in these themes are the Natura che Vale, which is a life integrated project that was developed by the Lombardy region in the last years. Then there is Etipol, of course, and Fondazione Cariplo, who is a bank foundation in northern Italy as well. The main objective of this innovative financial mechanism are to fund the prioritized action framework for Natura 2000 in Lombardy region, so to give financing to the main important conservation actions to be done in the protected areas in Italy, to implement the regional biodiversity and sustainable development strategy, and to involve the private sector and citizens in nature restoration activities. The key elements of these financial models are three. So the first one is a public grant, let's say a very traditional one of 3.5 million euro targeted to Natura 2000 managers that wanted to incentivize biodiversity conservation and forest climate adaptation measures and leverage private finance for conservation. Then there is a very particular business model that applicants had to assure when submitting their proposal that had to measure the ecosystem services impact with the use of the FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council procedures, and to have sponsors committed to support such ecosystem services. And finally, we have a technical assistance to support the regional parks and other applicants in identifying the right intervention and carry out FSC certification, and also, and maybe most important, in finding the right sponsors in this process. So I don't know if you know it, but the FSC is the Forest Stewardship Council, and it is the most globally trusted and recognized voluntary, independent, and third-party certification system for the responsible management of the world forest. And in particular, beside the forest management standard, in 2018, FSC launched also its procedure for the certification and verification of ecosystem services. With this procedure, it is possible to analyze the impact that a responsible management of the forest can have on the ecosystem in terms of additional provision of ecosystem services. In particular, these are the 5 ecosystem services that are targeted. So you find biodiversity conservation, CO2, watershed services, soil conservation, and tourism. So this is an important tool that is available, let's say, on the market to valorize and give more value to the ecosystem services. So going a little bit more in detail, how does this instrument work? So it all starts, as already mentioned, with a public fund of 3.5 million euro that is called what is called the Bioclima initiative that was targeted to the beneficiaries, which were Natura 2000 managers in terms of parks, municipalities, and local authorities. That had to submit to this grant project to enhance ecosystem services in the area, starting with biodiversity, but also with all the other ecosystem services that might be included in their project. And this is not innovative at all, as you can see. But here comes the innovative part, because when submitting this kind of project to the grant to be assessed, they had also to make available 1/3 of the financing, so 1.5 million out of 5 total, coming from the private sector. So they had to find the right sponsor that wanted to commit themselves to finance part of their project, finance part of their conservation activities. But why should they do that? It is because all of these projects promise to have a verification of ecosystem services. So all of these projects will and are improving the ecosystem services flow in their areas, and these positive impacts are being measured and being demonstrated through the FSC certification. And this demonstration is registered in a database, and such impacts can be allocated to the private sector companies or also individual citizens that are supporting this kind of intervention, that can so that the private sector can use this kind of impact for CSR reason and communicated their effort for the environment. But as you can understand, this kind of mechanism is quite tough to bring on. So the Cariplo Foundation also activated a technical assistance that we are as ETI4 are using, that has three main objectives. The first one was to give technical support to the beneficiaries in order for them to submit the project in time and with the right bureaucratic stuff, let's say. Then secure the private co-finance, so as already mentioned, find the right sponsor for each project, and also support the verification of the ecosystem services. That is what we are doing in this month. So how do we engage with the private sector, and how do we make sure that it is not greenwashing that they are doing through this project? It is, as you probably already know, through the mitigation hierarchy approach that simply states that the offset is the last part of the hierarchy. So you first have to understand your impact, you have to measure them, and then you have to avoid them, then minimize them, then restore them, and only at the end you can offset what is called the residual impact. And then you can also go above the zero, so having a net gain in this case of biodiversity, but it works the same for all the ecosystem services. So which were our key results for now, because the project is still ongoing. So we have 30 regional bodies and parks that expressed interest, and in the end, 18 applied, and 12 of them obtained the public financing. So at this moment, there are 12 projects that are ongoing, and this means that there are 3,000 hectares of conservation forests that are being certified with the FSC standard. We have 300 hectares of improved forest management with, as you can see, many ecosystem services that are enhanced through this improved forest management. And we also have 27 of direct intervention in which we have restored 16 protected habitats and 22 protected species. This is a simple overview of the project that are ongoing right now. So we have 8 river ecosystems and 4 mountain ecosystems that are targeted in this moment. And these are the private companies that we have signed contracts with so far. So the contracts are now worth €1 million, but we are still working on this. So the number is expected to increase, let's say. So please find out more information if you'd like at this link. You can find a general info page and also a page for companies and some Italian content. And if you have any question, of course, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Perfect, Julia. Thanks so much for the interesting program and the services that you are offering. I'm sure that you're helping a lot of nature-based solutions projects to take off with the technical assistance you are offering. So now I just want to call your attention that we added some of the links that Julia just mentioned to the chat. So this is gonna, so you can just click there. And I would like to flash all the speakers. Thank you so much for the tech support team. So we have everybody on screen now, and we would like to ask them some questions. I'll pass the word to my co-moderator, Maria, who will pose the questions. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you, Daniela, and thank you so much to our wonderful speakers. It's been a very insightful presentations, and we're very happy to have you here today. So I believe the presentations have been extremely clear, but we, however, have some questions that we would like to ask each of you so that we can have this discussion going. So I would like to first ask Monica, how does your organization usually work with local and regional governments to ensure that a project is successful? So what is one of the most important points for you to make public-private partnership project work.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I must confess that it will be through Network Nature Plus that I will be able to work more directly with local and regional governments. In the past, mostly I was working with national governments on the strategic planning part, because I used to work in the Netherlands Water Institute. And most recently, when I found Altamira, I have been working more directly with the Inter-American Development Bank or Wetlands International, for example. So there it has been more indirect, right? Like, but still local and regional governments always will play a role, because that's where you can have these integrated investment plans. So maybe let me go back to the factors of a great PPP, and then I explain also what normally I'm doing. So I think, like Daniela already said, it's all about clear expectations from all the sides, right? So you have to know with what your partners expect and what drives them. So it's about alignment of interest, but that depends on putting the right incentives in the tendering process and then in the contract, for example. And mostly also, I think regarding nature-based solutions, it will require much more early private sector engagement, right? Because the problem is authorities wait way too late. They have already conceived the whole project, and then they ask the private sector to come in, and they might say, this is not an interesting project for us. So it's finding ways to have like market dialogues and early private sector engagement to find out how your private sector can bring you to new ideas, right? Because we see private sector engaged in many value chains. They might have ideas you never thought of as a local and regional government. And so if you create spaces where they're able to do that in a pre-competitive space and open space, you might shape completely different projects than initially you thought of, right? Because they have, they have their drive that is maybe to do profits and so forth, but they know better than governments, that how to increase asset use, how to create value. That's their added value, right? So that's one thing. So basically what I have done so far is like with each of the parties, whether it's a development bank or Wetlands International, for example, they have a program in the high Andean wetlands, is to see what do they want to do in their phase, and they want to tap into innovative sources of finance, but they have to slowly see that these new sources of finance, they want different things. They want financial sustainability of these programs, right? So I work with them for them to see what they are doing is great, but they have to expand their scope. And that doesn't mean they will do those parts, but they will need strategic partners with whom they do that, right? So and I use a lot of group model building or system analysis techniques to make possible that, first of all, that I understand where they are. Because sometimes when we talk about investments, even they tell me we have all these investments. It's like, well, these are not really investments yet, right? You have technical assistance ideas, which are great, but they are not what an investor consider an investment. So it's a lot about creating a shared language that allows people, all the people you want involved in your public, private people partnership, to understand each other. And from there, you can build great ideas for the partnership, how to capture value. So yeah, because you're aligning, when you understand each other, it's less chance to have unrealistic expectations, I would say. So thank you for the question.
Thank you so much for the answer. And indeed, I will personally remain with this idea of creating spaces for the private sector to be as engaged as possible from the beginning. So thank you so much for the explanation. And with that, let's go all the way to Brazil. And we see a question in the chat for Jessica, who is curious to know most of the implementation of the park is based on environmental compensation from the development of the projects in the city. And is this conversation also being forwarded to the management of these spaces? You can find the question also in the Q&A box, Gabriel.
Okay. It's not the most part. Of course, the public resources are trying to implement with our own budgets and other public policies. But for this webinar. I just bring the private sector partnership with us. In the case of environmental compensations, we are still using this for management because this space that I show, it's riparian forest that have to be reforestations, conservations, and we have to management this. And the linear park concept that we bring here is to try to combine the ecological and social functions to try to maintain in a period of time more than usual the conservations of these spaces. But we can the environmental compensation is for the compensation of the impact of the entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurships or the activities. So we can't using this to maintaining some public space just to, I don't know, recovery one time, and then we have our responsibility as a public sector to maintain these public spaces. So it's hard, and we can combine these of the review legislations that we try to exchange the compensations for just planting trees in some cases to implementing these parks as ecological associated with social functions. So I don't know if I answered the questions, but this environmental compensations is just one actions that we have. The other parts is like a counterparts of the entrepreneurships or large projects. So they have to implement because we have a plan and they have a counterpart because this kind of project. So that's the point of the case.
Gabriel, so maybe like what you're saying is that the job of course, the public sector is to make sure that when you're doing compensation measures, that you're raising the quality, right? That you're looking at the, at the holistic, quality of the environmental quality, that you can get co-benefits, and that is not just about trees, right? So that's a very, very important point.
Yes, yes. Yes, this is the main idea. And in Brazil or Latin America, we have a lot of in urban spaces, green urban space. We have some kind of pressures of these areas because of a lot of things that we can discuss later. So how can we guarantee reforestations just with trees inside of urban areas that we have a lot of lack of some rights, basic rights of like food or green spaces and so on. So that's why we try to combine some trees with other kind of services and co-benefits that the linear park source, other NBSs could bring.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. And just to dive a little bit deeper into the role of the private sector. So who are the usual actors that are involved in your projects, like the linear parks that you presented, and what are they usually the roles that they take in your projects?
The first number that I show, it's just about the compensations or counterparts of the entrepreneurships or big projects buildings and human activities. So these are kind of the main actors. But now we are trying to, about the management of this space, we try to downscale with the neighborhoods and try to understand the citizens and the companies and local business there to bring to them to the projects. Like, oh, it's small things like, oh, you can't sell hamburgers inside the linear parks, but you have to maintain a square meters, 100 square meters, because you will also getting profits with this. Like, oh, it's a beautiful space. You can stay there and buy some hamburgers, and we can move to other kind of activities like painting agroforest systems, like producing food inside the linear parks is also ecological functions in these cases. and someone or some groups like associations or cooperatives that we have in Brazil. I don't know if it's cooperative, it's a common concept in the world, but we have here, and we can bring profits with these communities and also conservation benefits. So these small groups, I don't know if small is the right term, but can bring more benefits to us in these low-income neighborhoods. And for the big entrepreneurs, like a big shopping or a big building, they have to compensate the impact of this activity, and also a counterpart that we have in our legislations to the commonwealth, like common community. So because our plans, we can direct this investment that they have to expand in these linear parks or other kind of things.
Thank you so much, Gabriel, for taking the time and explaining. We would love to check out the YouTube video that you shared to learn more about the project. So just a reminder for everybody that the resource is available. So just looking at the time, maybe I would like to pose a question for Julia. So Julia, given the technical assistance that you are offering, what are the main challenges that you've encountered before? And do you have any tips on how to deal with them? Basically, any lesson learned from that?
Yes, thank you for the question. So I will maybe focus on the difficulties that we had addressing, let's say, the private sector, because for the natural resources manager, it's not maybe so focused on this. But there are other difficulties, let's say, with the public sector that I will not explain now. But probably there is a misalignment between the timing that the private sector is requiring and the timing that, let's say, nature can give. So it takes time, of course, to a tree to grow, etc. But most of the time, the companies, they want results now, and they want it to be quick and fast and clear and objective and everything together and everything by yesterday. So this is very, very hard to reach, and it is probably our main focus at the moment. We are trying to addressing this by developing quick methodologies that we can apply straightforward when it is required, and also like developing kind of step-by-step collaboration in order to give them something that is ready by now and maybe something later. So a collaboration that lasts over time, because if we, let's say, for example, say we don't have anything now, let's talk about in 1 month, of course, it will not be efficient and effective. Then also, and very quickly, they also really focus only on carbon by now. So it's very difficult to focus also on biodiversity, which is another focus of the bioclima initiative. So for now, we are working mainly on, let's say, bundle of ecosystem services. So selling, let's say, carbon together with biodiversity, because if we focus only on biodiversity, then it wouldn't be effective, but still they are two very different ecosystem services. So of course they cannot be exchanged or treated the same way. So this is another challenge that we are struggling with at the moment.
Thank you so much. So a step-by-step collaboration for long-term partnerships. Thank you so much, Julia. And with this, I would like to close the discussion round and give the word back to Daniela for closing. So thank you again.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for all the speakers for your answers. I think you approached the topic from very different angles. So Monica comes in, with the different models and the different examples, and yeah, the expertise that she's offering also in terms of, making PPPs mature and making them a win-win. For all different partners and for nature above all, because I know how committed Monica is to nature, to water, to biodiversity. And Gabriel comes in with the example from the city of Campinas and how they have been working with the linear parks there. So it's a very on the ground example. And how they have been collaborating there with the private sector. Thanks for bringing that in. And I do encourage everybody to watch Gabriel's video. And Julia, I think ETI4 is really also doing an amazing job. I know that you really have been pushing a lot, to actually teach, the interested parties a little bit how to do this, right? Because sometimes they're really interested in doing it, but they don't know where to start. So I think here the added value, of a technical assistant is really, really huge. And I also like that you try to do it in a different way, right? You try to innovate and bring like different components. And thanks for highlighting that. I know that carbon is still up high in the agenda, and sometimes biodiversity gets a bit forgotten. But yeah, I know all of us here, we're really trying to push the nature-based solutions agenda and show to cities and to the private sector that they don't have to choose, that they can actually find co-benefits and find win-win solutions, right, for all sectors. So yes, thank you for posting the chat. So the links for the resources from the Interact Bio project, we encourage all of you and the speakers as well. If you didn't see these two resources, we're happy to get your feedback. And with this, I close the webinar. It's 5:01 here in Europe, and I hope to see you in the next one next month. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.